Captain Sarah Chun stared at the holographic display floating above the conference table aboard the diplomatic vessel Unity's Hope. The faces of 12 different alien species gazed back at her with expressions ranging from disgust to pity. At the center sat Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Consortium, his crystalline features reflecting the cold blue light of the chamber. "The decision is final, Captain Chun." Veltar's voice resonated through the translation matrix, each word carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Humanity's membership in the Galactic Council is hereby revoked, effective immediately." Sarah felt her jaw clench. 3 years of negotiations, 3 years of proving humanity's worth, and it had all led to this moment. On what grounds? She demanded, though she already knew the answer. The Carathian representative, a massive insectoid creature with chitinous armor, clicked its mandibles in what Sarah had learned was their equivalent of laughter. "Your species is too volatile, too unpredictable. The incident at Kepler Station proved that humans cannot be trusted with advanced technology." "That was an accident," Sarah shot back. "The fusion reactor malfunction was caused by a design flaw in Zephyrian engineering, not human error." "Yet it was human hands that triggered the cascade failure," Ambassador Veltar interjected smoothly. "Your people's tendency toward emotional decision-making makes them unsuitable for membership in civilized galactic society." Dr. Marcus Webb, Sarah's chief science advisor, leaned forward in his chair. "We've contributed more to galactic science in our brief membership than some species have in centuries. Our medical advances alone have saved millions of lives across dozens of worlds." The ethereal delegate, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell, pulsed with amber light. "Your innovations are impressive, but your warriors are too aggressive. The Proxima conflict showed us what happens when humans are given military authority." Sarah's hands balled into fists beneath the table. The Proxima conflict had been necessary. The mining colony had been under attack by raiders, and human forces had been the only ones willing to respond. Yes, the battle had been brutal, but they had saved thousands of civilian lives. "We followed all established protocols," she said through gritted teeth. "You obliterated an entire raider fleet." The Aquatic Council representative gurgled through its water-filled breathing apparatus. "No survivors, no prisoners. Such wholesale destruction violates the Geneva Conventions of Space." "Those raiders had been terrorizing trade routes for months," Dr. Webb interjected. "They refused all attempts at negotiation and were actively murdering civilians. Our response was proportional to the threat." Ambassador Veltar raised one of his 4 arms, and the chamber fell silent. "The pattern is clear. Humans resort to violence when other species seek diplomatic solutions. You solve problems with destruction rather than understanding. The Galactic Council has voted, and the decision is unanimous." Sarah looked around the table at the faces of beings she had once considered allies. The cat-like Felinians avoided her gaze, their whiskers twitching with what might have been embarrassment. The rock-like lithoids remained motionless, their mineral features unreadable. Even the normally friendly avian collective delegates had their feathered heads bowed. "How long do we have?" Sarah asked quietly. 72 standard hours to evacuate all human personnel from Council space," Veltar replied. "All trade agreements are suspended indefinitely. All technological exchanges are terminated. Humanity will return to its isolated corner of the galaxy and remain there." Dr. Webb stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You're making a mistake. When the Devourer swarms return from the galactic rim, you'll wish you had humanity's warriors at your side." The Zephyrian ambassador's crystalline features shifted into what Sarah recognized as their version of a dismissive smile. "The Devourer threat is a myth, Doctor. Ancient propaganda used to justify military buildups. We have evolved beyond such primitive fears." "The long-range sensor arrays don't lie," Webb pressed. "The distortion patterns at the galactic edge are getting stronger. Something is coming." "Enough," Veltar said firmly. "Guards will escort you back to your vessel. You have 72 hours." As Sarah and her team were led from the chamber, she caught a glimpse of the Carathian representative's true feelings. The insectoid's compound eyes held something that looked suspiciously like regret, but it was too late for second thoughts. Back aboard the Unity's Hope, Sarah stood in the observation deck watching the massive council station grow smaller as they departed. The structure was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Dozens of different architectural styles blended seamlessly together, representing the unity of galactic civilization. A unity that no longer included humanity. "Captain," came the voice of Lieutenant Rodriguez from the bridge. "We're receiving priority transmissions from Earth. Admiral Hassan wants to speak with you immediately." Sarah made her way to her quarters and activated the quantum communicator. The stern face of Admiral Hassan materialized in the hologram. His dark eyes filled with barely contained fury. "I've already heard," he said before Sarah could speak. "The entire fleet has received the evacuation orders. 300 human vessels, thousands of personnel, all being forced to abandon everything we've built out here." "Sir, I don't think they understand what they're doing," Sarah began. "Oh, they understand perfectly," Hassan interrupted. "They want us gone because we remind them that sometimes problems can't be solved with committee meetings and strongly worded resolutions. Sometimes you have to actually fight." Sarah nodded grimly. Dr. Webb tried to warn them about the sensor readings from the rim. They dismissed it as warmongering. Of course they did. Hassan's expression darkened. "Well, they'll learn soon enough. Begin the evacuation immediately. All human colonies in Council space need to be abandoned within the 72-hour window." "What about the research stations? The medical facilities on Sanctuary Prime? We're treating patients from dozens of species there. Leave detailed instructions for the other species' medical teams. They're so confident in their advanced civilization. Let them prove it." As the transmission ended, Sarah slumped back in her chair. Sanctuary Prime alone housed critical research that could revolutionize treatment for half a dozen genetic diseases affecting multiple species. The atmospheric processors on New Terra were keeping 3 failing worlds habitable. The mining operations in the asteroid belt provided rare minerals essential for advanced technology. All of it would have to be abandoned. Over the next 60 hours, Sarah watched the greatest evacuation in human history unfold. Transport ships arrived from Earth, massive cargo vessels that had been hastily converted for passenger service. Families that had lived on Council worlds for generations packed their lives into cargo containers. Scientists destroyed years of research rather than leave it behind for species that no longer wanted their help. The hardest moments came at Sanctuary Prime. Dr. Elizabeth Okafor, head of the medical facility, had tears streaming down her face as she prepared to leave behind patients who depended on human expertise for their survival. "The Tylarian children with the genetic syndrome," she told Sarah over the communicator. "Without our enzyme therapy, they'll be dead within months. The Council physicians don't understand the treatment protocols. Can you train their doctors before we leave?" Sarah asked. "I've been trying for the past day," Elizabeth replied. "They keep insisting their methods are superior, even though their patients are dying. They'd rather lose lives than admit humans might know something they don't." The final evacuations were completed with 6 hours to spare. As the last human transport cleared Council space, Sarah stood once again in the observation deck of her ship. Behind them lay the glittering lights of galactic civilization, hundreds of worlds connected by trade, diplomacy, and shared knowledge. Ahead lay the darkness of human space, suddenly feeling very small and very lonely. "Captain," Lieutenant Rodriguez approached quietly. "We're receiving a coded transmission from the Felinian delegation. They want to meet secretly at the neutral station on the border." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "What do they want?" "They wouldn't say over open channels, but—" Rodriguez paused. "They sounded scared, Captain. Really scared." As the Unity's hopes set course for the border station, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of the story. Dr. Webb's warnings about the galactic rim echoed in her mind, and she remembered the Carathian representative's regretful expression. The Galactic Council had cast humanity out, confident in their own superiority and their ability to maintain peace through diplomacy alone. But Sarah had studied enough history to know that sometimes peace could only be preserved by those willing to fight for it. They would learn that lesson soon enough. The exile had begun, but Sarah suspected that before long, the galaxy would discover just how much they had lost when they cast out the warriors of humanity. And when that day came, she wondered if pride would prevent them from asking for help, even as their perfect civilization crumbled around them. The stars ahead looked cold and distant, but they were human stars now. And perhaps, in time, That would be enough. Admiral David Hassan stood before the massive view screen in Earth's Orbital Defense Command Center, watching the stream of returning vessels that had once carried humanity's hopes to the stars. 3 months had passed since the exile, and the mood throughout human space remained bitter. The greatest expansion in human history had ended not with victory or defeat, but with dismissal. "Admiral," called Commander Lisa Park from her station. "The last refugee transport from the Vega colony has just docked at Luna Station. That makes it official. Every human has been withdrawn from Council space." Hassan nodded grimly. "What's the total count?" 800,000 civilians, 50,000 military personnel, and over 1,000 research facilities abandoned. The economic impact alone will take decades to recover from. Dr. Marcus Webb entered the command center, carrying a tablet filled with sensor data. His face bore the exhausted expression of a man who had spent months trying to convince people of an unpleasant truth. "Admiral, the long-range arrays are picking up more distortion patterns," he announced. "The wave fronts are stronger now, and they're moving faster than our previous calculations suggested." Hassan turned from the view screen. "How much faster?" "If I'm reading this correctly, whatever's coming from the galactic rim will reach the outer Council systems in 18 months, not the 5 years we originally estimated." "Have you shared this with the Council?" Commander Park asked. Webb's laugh was bitter. "I've sent 17 separate reports. They won't even acknowledge receiving them." According to their official response, humanity's obsession with military threats is precisely why they were excluded from civilized society. Hassan felt his jaw tighten. "Show me the latest readings." The main display shifted to show a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. At the outer edge, vast sections showed the telltale distortion patterns that indicated massive objects moving through hyperspace. The signatures were unlike anything in the known databases, too large and too numerous to be conventional fleets. "These readings are consistent with the ancient records we recovered from the abandoned precursor sites," Webb explained. "The Devourers aren't a myth. They're a recurring threat that appears every few thousand years, strips entire sectors of resources, and then retreats to the galactic void. And the Council refuses to believe it," Hassan muttered. "Worse than that," Webb continued. "They've classified our research as fear-mongering propaganda and banned any discussion of it in academic circles. Several alien scientists who tried to replicate our findings have been censured." The command center's communication array chimed with an incoming priority message. Hassan activated the display, and the familiar face of Captain Sarachin appeared. "Admiral, I'm at the neutral border station. The Felinian delegation has some interesting news to share." "Put them through," Hassan ordered. The screen split to show Captain Chun standing beside Ambassador Whiskers. The translation matrix always rendered Felinian names in amusing ways, though the beings themselves were far from amusing. The cat-like alien's fur was standing on end, and his large eyes showed obvious distress. "Admiral Hassan," Whiskers began, his voice carrying through the translator with obvious strain. "I bring unofficial word from several Council species. There have been incidents." "What kind of incidents?" Hassan asked. 3 outer rim monitoring stations have gone silent in the past month. When investigation fleets arrived, they found nothing. No wreckage, no survivors, no trace that the stations had ever existed except for empty foundations and severed power cables. Webb looked up sharply from his tablet. "Which systems?" "Kepler 438, HD 40307, and, most recently, Wolf 1061, Whiskers replied. "All on the galactic rim, all in the projected path of the distortion patterns your Dr. Webb identified." Hassan and Webb exchanged glances. "What does the Council say about this?" Hassan asked. The Felinian's ears flattened against his skull. "They blame equipment malfunctions and administrative errors. Ambassador Veltar has suggested that the stations were simply reassigned and the paperwork was misfiled." "That's ridiculous," Commander Park interjected. "Monitoring stations don't just disappear." "We know this," Whiskers replied. "But the Council leadership refuses to consider alternatives. They have invested too much political capital in dismissing the Devourer threat to admit they might be wrong." Captain Chen stepped forward. "There's more, Admiral. The Felinians aren't the only ones with concerns. I've been contacted by representatives from the Lithoid Collective and the Aquatic Council. They're scared, but they can't speak openly without being accused of supporting human warmongering. Hassan considered this information carefully. What are they asking from us? Nothing official, Whiskers said quickly. But perhaps if humanity were to begin constructing defensive installations in your own space, and if some of us were to study your military technologies in an academic context. You want us to prepare for a war the Council won't admit is coming, Hassan translated. We want you to do what you do best, the Felinian replied. Prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. After the transmission ended, Hassan turned to his staff. Dr. Webb, I want every long-range sensor array we have focused on the galactic rim. If something's out there, I want to know about it before it shows up on our doorstep. Already on it, Webb replied. I've also been working with the xenobiology teams to analyze the old precursor records. The accounts of previous Devourer incursions are disturbing. How so? Webb activated his tablet, displaying ancient text alongside translated excerpts. According to these records, the Devourers don't just attack randomly. They're methodical. They target technological centers first, then agricultural worlds, then population centers. They strip everything, mineral resources, biomass, even the atmosphere if it contains useful gases. Commander Parks studied the ancient text. What happened to the civilizations that faced them before? Most were completely destroyed. The few that survived did so by abandoning their outer territories and retreating to heavily fortified core systems. But, even then, survival was only temporary. The Devourers always returned within a few generations. Hassan walked to the view screen, looking out at the peaceful blue marble of Earth hanging in the darkness below. How many previous incursions have there been? At least 7 that we can document, Webb replied. Each one reset galactic civilization back to a pre-space flight level. The current Council species are descendants of survivors from the last incursion, about 4,000 years ago. And they don't remember? Institutional memory is short when survival is at stake. The official histories speak of the Great Silence as a natural phenomenon, a time when space travel became impossible due to cosmic radiation. The idea that it was caused by hostile aliens is considered superstition. Over the following weeks, Hassan threw himself into preparing humanity for a threat that officially didn't exist. The industrial facilities that had once produced civilian goods were quietly retooled for military production. The asteroid mining operations that had supplied the Council were redirected to building defensive platforms. The work was made easier by the anger that still burned throughout human space. The exile had left deep wounds, and many humans were eager to prove their worth in the most definitive way possible. Dr. Elizabeth Okafor, recently returned from Sanctuary Prime, had established new medical research facilities that focused on battlefield medicine and biological warfare countermeasures. If we're going to be cast out for being too military, she told Hassan during one of their planning sessions, then let's be the best military the galaxy has ever seen. Captain Chun returned from another clandestine meeting at the border station with disturbing news. The disappearances are accelerating, she reported. 17 monitoring stations have gone silent in the past 2 weeks. The Carathian Collective has lost contact with 3 entire colonies. What's the Council's response? Hassan asked. They've declared the reports to be mass hysteria and threatened to sanction any species that continues spreading unfounded alarm. But privately, several delegations are beginning to panic. Webb looked up from his latest batch of sensor readings. They should be panicking. The distortion patterns have changed course. Whatever's out there, it's no longer following a straight path toward the galactic core. What do you mean? Hassan demanded. They're spreading out, covering more territory. If these readings are accurate, they're not just coming to one place. They're planning to sweep the entire outer rim simultaneously. Hassan felt a chill run down his spine. A single attack could be defended against, but a coordinated assault across multiple sectors would overwhelm any conventional defense. How long do we have? He asked. Webb consulted his calculations. At current speed, the first contact will occur in 14 months. And the Council still refuses to admit there's a problem? Worse, Shin replied. Ambassador Veltar has publicly announced that any species caught cooperating with human fearmongering will face sanctions similar to humanity's expulsion. Hassan walked to the strategic planning table and activated the holographic display of human space. Their territory was small compared to the vast reaches of the Council, barely 50 systems compared to the thousands under galactic government control. But those 50 systems were about to become the last bastion of organized resistance against an enemy that had destroyed civilizations before humanity had even discovered fire. "Commander Park," he said finally, "begin implementation of the Fortress Protocol. Every inhabited system gets a defense platform. Every world gets a militia. Every citizen gets basic military training." "Sir, the resource requirements will be enormous," Park warned. "Then, we'll find the resources. Dr. Webb, I want crash programs in weapons development, faster-than-light communications, and shield technology. If we're going to stand alone against this threat, we need every advantage we can get." Webb nodded grimly. "I'll contact the research teams from Sanctuary Prime and the other evacuated facilities. Most of them would love a chance to show the Council what they're missing." As his staff dispersed to implement his orders, Hassan remained at the planning table, staring at the holographic representation of human space. 50 systems against an enemy that had once conquered the entire galaxy. The odds were impossible, but then, again, humanity had never been known for accepting impossible odds. The Council had cast them out for being too violent, too unpredictable, too willing to fight when others sought peace. But when the Devourers came, those same qualities might be the only thing standing between civilization and complete annihilation. In 14 months, the galaxy would learn whether the Council had made a terrible mistake. Hassan intended to make sure that when that day came, humanity would be ready. Captain Sarah Chun gripped the armrests of her command chair as the Unity's Hope shuddered under the impact of another energy blast. Through the bridge view screen, she could see the nightmare that had emerged from the galactic rim. Massive, organic-looking vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, their surfaces crawling with what appeared to be living tissue. "Status report," she shouted over the din of klaxons and sparking consoles. "Hull integrity at 73%. Lieutenant Rodriguez called out from his station. "Shield generators are overheating, and we've lost 2 weapon arrays." Chen activated her communication system, broadcasting on all human frequencies. "This is Captain Chun to Admiral Hassan. The Devourers have arrived at Kepler 442. Council monitoring stations were destroyed within minutes of first contact. These things are unlike anything we've prepared for." The response came through crackling static as the alien vessel's energy emissions interfered with standard communications. "Understood, Captain. Fall back to Rally Point Alpha and transmit all tactical data. We need to know what we're fighting." Chen watched through the tactical display as another Council patrol fleet, a mixed force of Zephyrian cruisers and Carathian destroyers, attempted to engage the Devourer vessels. The alien ships moved with impossible grace for their size, flowing around the Council formations like living creatures. When they fired their weapons, the energy beams seemed to drain the life from enemy ships, leaving behind empty hulks that crumbled to dust within seconds. "My God," whispered Dr. Webb from his position at the science station. "They're not just destroying the ships, they're consuming them. Matter, energy, even the quantum signatures are being absorbed." The largest Devourer vessel, easily 10 times the size of a Council battlecruiser, turned its attention to the fleeing human ship. Chun felt her blood freeze as she saw the creature. And it was definitely a creature. Extend what looked like feeding tentacles toward them. "Emergency jump," she ordered. "All power to the hyperdrive." The Unity's Hope vanished into hyperspace just as the Devourer's weapons fire passed through the space they had occupied. The trip to Rally Point Alpha took 6 hours. 6 hours during which Chin's crew processed the tactical data they had gathered and tried to comprehend what they had witnessed. "The energy absorption appears to be their primary method of sustenance," Dr. Webb reported as he compiled his findings. "They're not just attacking, they're feeding. And, based on the quantum resonance patterns, I believe they're actually converting matter directly into usable energy." "Which means what exactly?" Chen asked. "It means they don't just destroy civilizations," Webb replied grimly. "They literally consume them. Every ship, every station, every planet they touch becomes fuel for their expansion." When they arrived at Rally Point Alpha, a hastily constructed staging area in an asteroid field near the edge of human space. Chun was shocked by what she found. The facility was swarming with activity as hundreds of alien vessels clustered around human command ships. Zephyrian crystalline cruisers floated alongside Felinian stealth vessels and massive lithoid boulder ships. Admiral Hassan's face appeared on the main screen as soon as the Unity's Hope docked. "Captain, report to the command center immediately. We have a situation developing." The command center was a scene of controlled chaos. Admiral Hassan stood at the center of a three-dimensional tactical display showing the entire galactic rim, while representatives from a dozen alien species argued frantically around him. Chun recognized Ambassador Whiskers from the Felinian delegation, but many of the others were species that had voted for humanity's expulsion. "Ah, Captain Chun," Hassan said as she entered. "Perfect timing. Perhaps you can help settle this debate." Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Consortium turned toward her, his crystalline features showing obvious distress. "Captain, you must convince Admiral Hassan to share your defensive technologies with us immediately. The Devourer forces have broken through the outer rim defenses faster than anyone predicted." Chun looked at Hassan questioningly. The Admiral's expression was carefully neutral, but she could see the satisfaction in his eyes. "It seems," Hassan said slowly, "that after 18 months of denying the Devourer threat, the Council has suddenly discovered an urgent need for human military expertise." A new voice cut through the chatter, harsh, clicking sounds that Chun recognized as Carathian. The translation came through clearly. "Our colonies in the Tau Ceti sector have gone silent. 7 billion Carathians simply gone. No distress signals, no evacuation attempts. The Devourers consumed 3 entire star systems in less than a week." "And the Council's response?" Chun asked. Veltar's crystalline form seemed to dim. Emergency Session 7741 concluded that the threat requires unprecedented cooperation between all galactic species. All previous sanctions and exclusions have been officially suspended. "How convenient," Dr. Webb muttered from behind Chun. Hassan stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent months preparing for this moment. "Let me make something clear to all of you. 3 months ago, you cast humanity out of galactic society because we were too violent, too unpredictable, too focused on military solutions. Now you come to us begging for those same military solutions to save your civilizations." The assembled aliens shifted uncomfortably. The Felinian representative, Ambassador Whiskers, spoke up. "Admiral, with respect, the past is irrelevant now. We need to work together to survive." "The past is entirely relevant," Hassan replied coldly. "Dr. Webb warned you about the sensor readings 18 months ago. We offered to share our defensive preparations. We tried to convince you to take the threat seriously. Your response was to silence us and ban any discussion of the danger." Veltar's crystalline features rippled with what Chun recognized as their version of embarrassment. "We acknowledge that mistakes were made, but surely you understand that the survival of galactic civilization transcends political disagreements." Hassan activated the tactical display, showing the current position of Devourer forces. The presentation was sobering. Vast swaths of the galactic rim were already showing as consumed, while the alien advance continued toward the galactic core at an accelerating pace. "According to our projections," Hassan said, "the Devourers will reach the Council core systems in approximately 8 months. However, they're not advancing in a straight line. They're systematically stripping each system of all useful resources before moving on. This suggests they're planning for a permanent occupation, not just a raid." The Aquatic Council representative gurgled through its breathing apparatus. "What do you propose we do? First, you acknowledge that humanity was right about the threat. Second, you formally apologize for the exile and restore our full Council membership with voting rights. Third, you place all Council military forces under unified human command for the duration of the crisis." The command center erupted in overlapping protests and arguments. Chun watched the various aliens gesticulate and posture, remembering how these same beings had dismissed humanity with such confidence just months earlier. "Unacceptable," clicked the Carathian representative. "Human command structure is too aggressive, too focused on destruction. Your destruction-focused approach is exactly what we need," Hassan replied calmly. The Devourers cannot be negotiated with. They cannot be reasoned with. They exist only to consume. The only response is complete military annihilation. Dr. Webb stepped forward with his tablet. I've been analyzing the tactical data from Captain Chen's encounter. The Devourer's feeding process has a critical vulnerability. The matter-to-energy conversion requires approximately 14 seconds to complete. During that time, their defensive systems are offline while they digest. Meaning? Asked Veltar. Meaning we can hurt them, Chen answered. But only if we're willing to use tactics that the Council has always considered too extreme. Hassan nodded grimly. Exactly. We need to be willing to sacrifice ships, stations, even entire fleets to create openings for decisive strikes. This isn't a police action or a peacekeeping mission. This is total war. The debate continued for hours, but the sound of approaching emergency klaxons settled the matter. A Zephyrian scout ship had just arrived with news that the Devourer advance had accelerated again. They had consumed the Rigel sector in just 2 days. Impossible, whispered Veltar. Rigel has 47 inhabited worlds and over 100 billion inhabitants. Had corrected the scout ship's commander through the communication array. Now it's empty space and scattered asteroids. The Devourers are adapting their feeding process, becoming more efficient. Hassan looked around the room at the assembled alien representatives. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of various classifications. You have exactly 1 hour to make your decision. Either you place your forces under human command and fight this war our way, or you fight it alone while we protect our own territory. As the aliens huddled in frantic consultation, Chen approached the Admiral. Sir, do we actually have a plan that can stop them? Hassan's smile was grim, but determined. Captain, for the past 18 months, we've been preparing for a war that everyone said would never happen. We've built weapons that violate every treaty the Council ever signed. We've developed tactics that would horrify every military ethicist in the galaxy. And we've trained our people to fight without mercy or hesitation. He gestured toward the tactical display, showing the advancing Devourer forces. These creatures think they're going to consume another helpless civilization like they have for thousands of years. They're about to discover that humanity is nothing like the species they've faced before. The hour passed quickly. When the alien representatives reconvened, Veltar spoke for all of them. The Galactic Council formally requests that humanity resume its membership with full authority over military operations. All Council forces are hereby placed under human command. Hassan nodded. Excellent. Captain Chun, begin Phase 1 of Operation Prometheus. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when humanity goes to war. As Chun left to begin implementing the battle plans that had been 18 months in the making, she couldn't help but smile. The Devourers had consumed dozens of civilizations over the millennia, but they were about to encounter something unique in galactic history, a species that had been preparing for them specifically, and that had no intention of going quietly into extinction. The real war was about to begin. Fleet Admiral David Hassan stood in the command center of the massive battle station Defiance, watching as the largest military fleet in galactic history prepared for the most desperate battle ever fought. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of over 10,000 vessels, human warships at the center, surrounded by the combined fleets of every Council species. Status report, he called to his staff. Commander Lisa Park looked up from her tactical console. All fleets report ready, sir. The Devourer advance force is 48 hours from the Centauri defense line. Estimated enemy strength is 3,000 bioships, including 12 of the massive World Eater-class vessels. Hassan nodded grimly. Intelligence reports had confirmed his worst fears. The Devourers weren't just consuming matter and energy. They were learning from each encounter. The creatures that had been merely terrifying 18 months ago had evolved into something far worse. Dr. Webb, are the new weapons systems ready? Dr. Marcus Webb looked up from his science station, his face haggard from months of intensive research. The Prometheus warheads are loaded and armed. I still think we're insane for building them. But, yes, they're ready. Captain Sarah Chun entered the command center, her expression grim. Admiral, the alien commanders are requesting another briefing on our battle plan. They're getting nervous about the unconventional tactics. Hassan almost smiled. Unconventional was one way to describe what humanity had prepared. Absolutely horrifying might be more accurate. Very well. Conference room 3 in 10 minutes. Make sure Ambassador Veltar is there. If we're going to shock them, we might as well shock their leadership. The conference room filled quickly with representatives from across the galaxy. Hassan looked around the table at beings he had once considered allies, then enemies, and now desperate partners in survival. The war had a way of clarifying relationships. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted biological classifications, Hassan began. In approximately 46 hours, the largest Devourer fleet in recorded history will reach our defensive line. Based on previous engagements, conventional tactics give us approximately a 12% chance of victory. Ambassador Veltar's crystalline features shifted with anxiety. Admiral, perhaps we should reconsider falling back to the core systems. Absolutely not, Hassan interrupted. We make our stand here, or we don't make one at all. The Devourers grow stronger with every system they consume. By the time they reach the core worlds, they'll be unstoppable. The Carathian military representative clicked its mandibles aggressively. Then, what do you propose? Your human forces number only 1,500 ships against 3,000 enemies. Hassan activated the holographic display, showing a detailed breakdown of the human fleet composition. Quantity isn't everything. Quality matters. Preparation matters. Most importantly, ruthlessness matters. Dr. Webb stepped forward with his ever-present tablet. We've spent 18 months studying captured Devourer biomatter from destroyed scout ships. Their regenerative capabilities are remarkable, but they have critical weaknesses. Such as? Asked the Felinian representative. They're quantum entangled with their food source during the consumption process, Webb explained. When they feed, they become temporarily vulnerable to quantum disruption weapons. Veltar's form brightened with what might have been hope. You've developed quantum disruptors? We've developed something better, Hassan replied coldly. We've weaponized quantum entanglement itself. He pressed a control, and the display changed to show a schematic of a weapon that made several aliens recoil in horror. The Prometheus warhead contains a quantum cascade generator. When detonated near a feeding devourer, it creates a feedback loop that travels through the quantum entanglement back to every other devourer connected to the feeding network. The theoretical result, Webb continued, is the simultaneous destruction of every devourer within approximately 50 light-years of the detonation point. The conference room erupted in shocked protests. The Aquatic Council representative's water tank practically bubbled with agitation. Such a weapon violates every principle of civilized warfare. The Devourers aren't civilized, Hassan replied calmly. They're a force of nature, a cosmic plague that has to be eradicated completely or not at all. But the risks, Veltar protested. Quantum cascade weapons could destabilize space-time itself. You could destroy solar systems, collapse hyperspace lanes. We've run the calculations, Webb assured him. The cascade effect is limited to biological quantum entanglement. It won't affect normal matter or energy. You think, the Carathian clicked ominously. But you don't know for certain. Hassan leaned forward, his expression hardening. You're absolutely right. We don't know for certain. But I know for certain what happens if we lose this battle. The Devourers consume the entire galaxy, and every sentient species becomes extinct. So yes, we're taking a calculated risk with potentially catastrophic consequences. Because the alternative is guaranteed extinction. Captain Chun activated another display showing the current positions of the approaching Devourer fleet. The enemy vanguard consists of smaller bioships that will attempt to establish feeding links with our defensive platforms. Once they begin consuming our installations, the larger ships will move in for the primary assault. How do we prevent the initial feeding? Asked the Felinian commander. We don't, Hassan replied. We let them feed. In fact, we encourage it. The shocked silence that followed was broken only by the hum of the station's life support systems. Finally, Veltar managed to speak. You intend to sacrifice your own defensive installations? Not sacrifice, Hassan corrected. Bait. Each of our defensive platforms has been equipped with quantum cascade initiators. When the Devourers begin feeding, we trigger the cascade effect and destroy the entire feeding network simultaneously. And if you're wrong about the cascade limits, demanded the Carathian. If you accidentally tear a hole in space-time? Hassan's smile was cold and absolutely humorless. Then, we'll have solved the Devourer problem permanently, along with everything else in this sector of the galaxy. Dr. Webb cleared his throat nervously. Admiral, perhaps we should mention the other components of the battle plan. Ah yes, Hassan said, activating new displays. Phase 2 involves the deployment of our new ship killer missiles. Unlike conventional weapons that try to penetrate Devourer bioarmor, these missiles are designed to be consumed. Consumed? Veltar asked faintly. Each missile contains a concentrated antimatter payload wrapped in quantum-entangled exotic matter. When a Devourer attempts to digest the missile, the antimatter detonates inside its digestive system. The conference room had become completely silent except for the sound of several aliens' breathing apparatus working overtime. Phase 3, Hassan continued relentlessly, involves our new boarding tactics. Human marine units will use modified atmospheric suits to infiltrate Devourer bioships during combat. To accomplish what? The Felinian asked in a horrified whisper. Captain Chen answered, to plant neural disruptor charges in their central nervous systems. If we can't kill them from outside, we'll kill them from inside. You're talking about sending soldiers into the bodies of living starships, the Carathian stated. Precisely, Hassan confirmed. Our Marines have been training in zero-gravity acid environments for 6 months. They're ready. Ambassador Veltar's crystalline form had dimmed considerably. Admiral, these tactics they're monstrous. Even against creatures like the Devourers, surely there are ethical limits. No. Hassan interrupted firmly. There are no ethical limits when facing extinction. The Devourers have consumed hundreds of civilizations over the millennia because those civilizations were constrained by ethics, mercy, and moral considerations. We won't make that mistake. He stood up, placing his hands on the conference table and looking directly at each alien representative. 18 months ago, you expelled humanity from galactic civilization because we were too violent, too willing to resort to extreme measures. Today, that violence and those extreme measures are the only things standing between your species and complete annihilation. The room remained silent for several moments before the Felinian commander spoke quietly. What do you need from our fleets? Support the human battle groups and follow our tactical directions exactly. No independent actions, no attempts to negotiate with the enemy, no moral objections to our methods. This is total war, and it will be won or lost based on our willingness to do whatever is necessary. Over the next 46 hours, Hassan watched the greatest military preparation in galactic history unfold. Human engineering teams worked around the clock to install quantum cascade initiators on thousands of defensive platforms. Marine units conducted final training exercises in simulated Devourer bioship environments. Weapons specialists armed the new antimatter missiles and checked the Prometheus warhead systems one final time. Most remarkably, the alien fleets integrated themselves into human tactical formations with minimal friction. The threat of extinction had a way of overcoming political differences and philosophical objections. Admiral, Commander Park called from her station as the deadline approached. Long-range sensors are detecting the Devourer Vanguard. 3 hours until first contact. Hassan activated the fleet-wide communication system. All ships, all stations, all personnel, this is Admiral Hassan. In 3 hours, we will face an enemy that has destroyed every civilization it has ever encountered. They expect us to behave like every other species they've consumed, to fight defensively, to show mercy, to limit ourselves with ethical constraints. He paused, looking out through the command center's viewports at the assembled fleet. They're wrong. We are not like the species they've destroyed before. We are humanity, and when threatened with extinction, we don't just fight. We innovate, we adapt, and we become more dangerous than our enemies ever imagined possible. The communication system carried his voice to millions of personnel across thousands of ships. Today, we show the galaxy what happens when humanity goes to war. Not for conquest, not for glory, but for the simple right to exist. Remember that the beings fighting beside us today once cast us out for being too violent. Let's prove them right. As the transmission ended, Hassan turned to his staff. All stations, battle ready. It's time to save the galaxy. Through the view screen, the first dark shapes of the Devourer vanguard became visible against the star field. They moved with the fluid grace of predators that had never known defeat, approaching the human defensive line with absolute confidence. They were about to discover that confidence could be a fatal flaw when facing an enemy that had been planning for this moment for 18 months, an enemy that had no intention of being anyone's meal. 6 months after the Battle of Centauri Defense Line, Fleet Admiral David Hassan stood in the rebuilt council chambers on the restored station at Alpha Centauri. The massive chamber bore scars from the devastating conflict, sections of wall where quantum cascade explosions had torn through space-time itself, memorial plaques listing the billions who had died in the greatest battle ever fought, and, most prominently, a holographic display showing the current status of galactic civilization. The display told a sobering story. Of the 300,000 inhabited worlds that had existed before the Devourer War, fewer than 100,000 remained. Entire sectors of the galaxy showed as empty space where thriving civilizations had once flourished. But those empty sectors also told another story. The Devourers were gone. Completely, utterly, finally, extinct. Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Consortium stood before the assembled delegates, his crystalline features reflecting the somber mood of the chamber. The final casualty reports have been compiled. The war cost us over 2 trillion sentient lives, 40% of our industrial capacity, and 60% of our military fleets. But we're alive, clicked the Korathian representative, General Hive Queen Zakthar. For the first time in 4,000 years, the galaxy faces no existential threat from the Rim. Hassan listened to the various reports with half his attention. The other half was focused on the data streaming to his personal tablet, reports from human reconstruction fleets that were already beginning the massive task of reclaiming and rebuilding the consumed sectors. Admiral Hassan, Veltar called, drawing his attention back to the proceedings. The Council would like your assessment of the reconstruction timeline. Hassan stood, still wearing his battle-worn uniform rather than the diplomatic robes the occasion might have called for. The war had changed him, just as it had changed everything else. The immediate threat is over, he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. But the Devourer War was just the first phase of a much larger challenge. We now face the task of rebuilding a civilization that took millennia to develop. Dr. Marcus Webb, now bearing the title of Chief Science Advisor to the Council, activated a series of displays showing the scope of the reconstruction effort. The consumed sectors aren't just empty. They've been stripped down to quantum foam in many cases. We're not just rebuilding planets and space stations. We're literally recreating matter itself in some regions. How long? Asked the Felinian representative, Ambassador Whiskers. With current technology and resources, approximately 400 years for basic infrastructure, another 2 centuries for full population recovery, Webb replied. The chamber fell silent as the magnitude of the task sank in. Hassan waited for the inevitable question. Admiral, came a voice from the Aquatic Council section. What would be required to accelerate the timeline? Hassan exchanged glances with Webb before answering. Complete technological integration across all species. No more proprietary technologies, no more restricted research areas, no more political barriers to scientific cooperation. You're talking about abandoning our individual technological advantages, observed the representative from the Silicon-based collective. I'm talking about survival, Hassan replied firmly. The Devourer War taught us that in a crisis, species-specific advantages mean nothing. What matters is the ability to work together, share knowledge, and adapt quickly to changing threats. Veltar's crystalline form brightened with what might have been hope. And, in return, humanity would share its military innovations. Hassan's smile was grim. Humanity will share everything. Our quantum cascade technology, our bioship infiltration techniques, our antimatter weaponry, all of it. On one condition. Which is? Asked General Zakthar. This council never again makes decisions based on fear of what a species might do rather than on what they have actually done. The Devourer War happened because you were so afraid of human aggression that you ignored an actual existential threat. Captain Sarah Chun, now bearing the rank of Admiral and serving as Hassan's chief strategic advisor, stood from her position near the human delegation. We've prepared a formal proposal for the new galactic government structure. The proposal appeared on the main display, and Hassan watched the alien representatives study it with growing amazement. It was nothing like the old council system. You're proposing a military republic, Veltar observed. I'm proposing a system designed for survival, Hassan corrected. Every member species maintains internal autonomy, but all external threats are handled by a unified command structure with the authority to mobilize resources instantly. Under human leadership? Asked the Carathian with obvious suspicion. Under competent leadership, Chen replied. Species rotation every 10 years, with command authority based on demonstrated ability rather than political maneuvering. Dr. Webb activated another display showing the proposed technological sharing protocols. More importantly, all research and development becomes a cooperative effort. No more hiding breakthrough technologies for competitive advantage. What about economic systems? Asked the Aquatic Council representative. Hassan had been expecting this question. Resource allocation based on need and contribution rather than historical claims or political influence. The species that contribute the most to galactic defense and reconstruction get priority access to resources. The debate that followed lasted for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The Devourer War had changed everything, and the old systems of galactic governance were as extinct as the creatures that had nearly destroyed them. There is one final matter, Veltar said as the formal voting concluded. The matter of humanity's methods during the war. The quantum cascade weapons, the antimatter infiltration tactics, the neural disruptor boarding actions. These represent a level of warfare that many find disturbing. Hassan stood slowly, his expression hardening. Ambassador Veltar, are you suggesting that humanity used excessive force against an enemy that was literally eating entire civilizations? I'm suggesting that the precedent concerns some species. If humanity is willing to use such extreme measures against one threat, what prevents them from using those same measures against other species in future conflicts? The chamber fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Hassan looked around the room at the representatives of species that had once cast humanity out for being too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous. You want guarantees, he said finally. You want assurance that humanity won't turn its weapons on former allies. That would be appreciated, Veltar replied carefully. Hassan's laugh was completely devoid of humor. Ambassador, 6 months ago, the Devourers were less than a week away from reaching the core systems when we finally stopped them. We used every weapon we had, every tactic we could devise, and every advantage we could create. If we had failed, this conversation wouldn't be happening because none of us would exist. He walked to the central display, pointing to the empty sectors where entire civilizations had been consumed. You want to know what prevents humanity from using those same weapons against other species? Simple. We built those weapons to fight extinction, not to conquer neighbors. When the existential threat ended, so did the justification for existential weapons. Dr. Webb stepped forward with his tablet. The Prometheus quantum cascade warheads have been dismantled. The antimatter infiltration systems have been converted to civilian mining equipment. The neural disruptor technology has been adapted for medical applications. But the knowledge remains, observed General Zakthar. Yes, Hassan confirmed. The knowledge remains. Just as it should. Because if another existential threat emerges, and history suggests it will, we need to be ready to fight with the same ruthless determination that saved us from the Devourers. Admiral Chun activated a new display showing the current deployment of human forces throughout the galaxy. Human military units are currently engaged in reconstruction efforts in 47 sectors. We're building infrastructure, establishing defensive networks, and training local militias. Our focus is on making sure another Devourer-level catastrophe never catches us unprepared. And if we refuse these proposed governmental changes? Asked a representative from one of the smaller species. Hassan's expression became absolutely cold. Then, you refuse them. But humanity will continue the reconstruction effort with whichever species choose to participate. We've learned that waiting for universal consensus is a luxury we can't afford when facing existential threats. The final vote was unanimous, though Hassan suspected some of the enthusiasm was motivated more by fear than genuine conviction. But Motivation mattered less than results, and the results spoke for themselves. As the session concluded and the various representatives departed to inform their home governments of the new galactic order, Hassan remained in the chamber with his core team. "Think it will work?" Chen asked. "It has to," Hassan replied. "The alternative is watching civilization tear itself apart while waiting for the next crisis." Dr. Webb was studying his tablet, reviewing the latest reports from the reconstruction fleets. "There's something else we need to consider. The quantum cascade weapons. Their use created some unusual effects in the affected space-time regions." "What kind of effects?" Hassan asked. "Accelerated stellar formation, enhanced habitability zones around certain stars, even the spontaneous generation of complex organic compounds in some systems. It's as if the cascade effect didn't just destroy the devourers, it made the galaxy more suitable for life." Hassan considered this information carefully. "Are you suggesting the weapons had unintended benefits?" "I'm suggesting they might not have been entirely unintended. The precursor records we recovered included references to quantum gardening, using cascade effects to enhance the life-bearing capacity of stellar regions." Chen looked up sharply. "You think the precursors faced the devourers before and left us instructions for defeating them?" "I think," Webb said slowly, "that this cycle has repeated multiple times over galactic history. Civilizations rise, the devourers return, and if the civilizations are lucky enough to discover quantum cascade technology, they reset the galaxy for the next cycle." Hassan walked to the chamber's main view screen, looking out at the stars that now held both empty sectors and regions of unprecedented fertility. "Then, our job isn't finished. We're not just rebuilding the current civilization. We're preparing the foundation for whatever comes next." "The Council won't like hearing that there might be other threats out there," Chen observed. "The Council doesn't have to like it," Hassan replied. "They just have to be ready for it. Humanity learned 18 months ago that being prepared for threats that everyone knows won't happen is the price of survival." As his team prepared to leave, Hassan remained at the view screen for several more minutes. The galaxy was healing, rebuilding, and adapting to the new order that the Devourer War had created. But somewhere in the deep archives of human space, the blueprints for quantum cascade weapons remained carefully preserved. Because the greatest lesson of the war wasn't that such weapons should never be built, it was that they should never be needed. And the only way to ensure they were never needed was to remain strong enough that no enemy would ever again mistake humanity or its allies for easy prey. The Council had cast humanity out for being too dangerous. The Devourer War had proven that sometimes being dangerous was the only way to survive. And sometimes the greatest act of peace was being prepared for war.